In 1896, two countries fought a war that was completely over before most people even finished breakfast, and somehow, this is one of the most documented events in British colonial history. I'm not talking about a skirmish or a ceasefire or a standoff that everyone agreed to walk away from. I mean a declared war, with warships, cannon fire, a palace assault, and an official surrender. The whole thing, start to finish, lasted between 38 and 45 minutes. That's in the Guinness World Records. That's a verifiable fact. And if you've never heard of the Anglo-Zanzibar War of 1896, buckle up, because the story of how it started is somehow even wilder than the fact that it ended before your morning coffee got cold. To understand why this war happened, you need to understand the situation in Zanzibar in the 1890s. Zanzibar, an island archipelago off the coast of what is now Tanzania, was at the time a British protectorate. Not a colony exactly, but Britain had enormous control over it, backed by a treaty signed in 1886. That treaty, documented in F.B. Pierce's 1920 book, Zanzibar, the island metropolis of Eastern Africa, included a very specific clause. Any new sultan had to be approved by the British consul before taking power. It sounds like a formality. It was not a formality. On August 25, 1896, the reigning sultan, Hamad bin Thuwaini, died, and within hours, his cousin, a man named Khalid bin Bargash, walked into the palace, surrounded himself with armed guards, and declared himself the new sultan, without asking anyone. He did not have British approval. He almost certainly knew he wasn't going to get it. Now, here's where it gets genuinely insane. The British consul at the time, a man named Basil Cave, immediately sent word to London and issued an ultimatum to Khalid. Stand down, evacuate the palace, and do not declare yourself sultan, or face the consequences. Khalid's response, and I want you to really appreciate this, was to start barricading the palace and recruiting more men to his cause. According to Byron Farwell's Queen Victoria's Little Wars, Khalid managed to assemble roughly 2,800 supporters, including palace guards and civilians who had volunteered to fight. He also positioned artillery. And, this is the part I had to fact-check twice, he had a navy. One ship. A single royal yacht called the HHS Glasgow. He pointed it at the British fleet in the harbor. The British fleet, which at this point included 5 warships. Khalid was either the bravest man in Zanzibar, or he had profoundly miscalculated the situation. While Khalid was fortifying his position, British Rear Admiral Harry Rawson was arranging those 5 warships in the harbor in a very deliberate way, guns trained on the palace. This is all documented in Admiralty records held at the National Archives in Kew, reference ADM 1/7363. Consul Cave sent a final ultimatum. By 9 a.m. on August 27th, Khalid had to stand down. If he didn't, the British would open fire. The deadline arrived. Khalid had not stood down. At 9:02 a.m., the British ships opened fire on the palace. The bombardment lasted, and I want you to sit with this number, approximately 38 to 45 minutes. That's the entire war. So what did 38 to 45 minutes of naval bombardment actually look like? The palace, which was not built to withstand 5 British warships, was devastated. Khalid's artillery was destroyed almost immediately. The HHS Glasgow, the one-ship navy, was sunk within minutes. The palace flag was shot down, which in the military conventions of the era signaled surrender. But here's the thing nobody really dwells on. According to Farwell's account and British Admiralty casualty reports, approximately 500 of Khalid's men were killed or wounded during that bombardment. 500 people in less than an hour. On the British side, one sailor was wounded. The asymmetry is staggering, and it's a number that tends to get lost when people reduce this story to a punchline about a short war. So what happened to Khalid? Here's the part that sounds like it's from a spy novel. He fled. While his palace was being shelled, Khalid bin Bargash made his way to the German consulate in Zanzibar and claimed diplomatic asylum. And, because international law in 1896 was a complicated and inconvenient thing, Germany granted it. Britain could not legally drag him out. He sat in the German consulate while the smoke cleared. He remained in exile for years. He was eventually captured not by Britain, but during the upheaval of World War I in East Africa, documented in Norman Robert Bennett's A History of the Arab State of Zanzibar, published by Methuen in 1978. He ended up in exile in St. Helena, of all places, the same island where Napoleon had been exiled. You could not make this stuff up. Britain immediately installed a new sultan, Hamoud bin Muhammad. And here's the part of this story that I think deserves way more attention than it gets. Sultan Hamoud, backed by British pressure, abolished slavery in Zanzibar in 1897, just 1 year after the war. Frederick Cooper's Plantation Slavery on the East Coast of Africa, published by Yale University Press, documents this in detail. Zanzibar had been a major hub of the East African slave trade for centuries. The 38-minute war, as absurd as it sounds in the telling, was followed within a year by one of the most significant legal reforms in the region's history. That doesn't redeem British imperialism. That's not the argument. But it does mean the shortest war in history had consequences that lasted generations. So, why does this story matter beyond being a wild pub quiz answer? Because it's a perfect encapsulation of how history actually works. Not grand cinematic clashes that last years and fill textbooks, but fast, chaotic, almost accidental events driven by one person making a bad decision on a Tuesday morning. Khalid bin Bargash sat in a palace he wasn't supposed to be in, looked at 5 British warships in the harbor, and thought, I'll hold. The entire course of Zanzibar's history changed in the time it takes to watch 2 episodes of a sitcom. The Guinness World Records still lists it. The documents are still at Q. If that blew your mind, there's more where that came from. Every week we find the stories that sound completely made up and prove they're completely real. Hit subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss one.